Another important process of our system is vermicomposting. So vermicomposting, you're probably familiar with composting, but vermicomposting means that we are composting with worms. So in this area here, we have all of our composting bins, and you can see these are all labeled that the composting is currently in progress. So I'm just going to tell you how we compost here at the farmery. It's not necessarily something that you will need to do in your volunteerships, but just so you know how the process works and how we get such rich compost to put in our system that makes our greens taste out of this world. So we want to start with one of our bins here, and we place a layer of soil in the bottom. After we have the soil, we add our worms. So I can show you some of our worms here that have made their way to the top. So this is one of our very best friends here at the farmery that makes our compost so wonderful. I'm going to put this guy back and let him get back to work. So after you place the worms into the soil, we're going to place another layer of soil over top, and then we're going to use our slurry. So normally in composting, you're throwing all of your food waste in there so that it can help your compost become more filled with nutrients. Here with our food waste, we turn it into a slurry. So we use a high-powered blender, and we place everything that we want to compost in there. So that includes, like scraps of produce, or even bones from meat or eggshells can be blended up into this slurry. So we place all of that into the blender. We actually use some water from our fish tank, place that into the blender as well to thin it out, and then blend it all up. So after that's been blended, we want to just dump it in an even layer over the soil, and then we're placing another layer of soil over that. So the purpose of the slurry is to prevent pests from being attracted to our compost. So if the food waste is mixed in with the soil and is covered by the soil, then it has a better chance of not attracting those pests. So how it works after that, the worms make their way up, eat through that food waste, and then they're up on the next layer of soil. So how I was able to get the worms so easily from the top of this bin is that the worms are at the top here, and we're ready for another layer. So if I was going to continue with the composting of this bin today, I would make my slurry, put it over top, and then put more soil on top. So after we've gone through that, and you just keep adding more as the worms come up, and once they've reached close to the top, we want to put this over top of the bin. So once we put this over, we're putting it right on top of the soil that's at the top of the bin, and we're placing more dirt over top of it. So the worms will make their way through to the top of this as they're eating food waste, and then they're caught on the top of this. so that it's easy for us to move the worms to a new bin. So once this bin has been finished and I have the worms from the top, I can easily take this up and put it in the bottom of a brand new bin. In addition to using this netting to get the worms out of the composting bin, we're also trying something new. So that's, the benefit of working in the farmery, is that we're always trying out new techniques and figuring out ways to improve our system. So one way that we're getting worms out of the composting bins now is by using another bin and putting it on top. So we have holes in the bottom of the bins for these new top bins, and we'll put a layer of coir there and then a layer of soil, and the worms will work their way through those holes. And then once we have them in that new bin, we'll move the bin and start a whole new composting process. So adding more soil and more slurry. So if you see a bin that's on top of a bin here, it takes about a week for the worms to get up to the next bin. So we'll be keeping track of how long one is on top, but if you see a bin on top here, just leave it be, because that means the composting is still in process. Another huge benefit of using worms in composting, first, it cuts down on the amount of time that it takes to compost, and second, it adds a lot more nutrients. So the worms produce worm castings, or worm poop, and that's what helps the soil to be so nutrient rich. So after we have taken the worms out of the compost, we actually want to let it sit for about a month so that it can cure. This allows any microorganisms that are in the soil to die, so that they are not introduced to our system, and so that they don't turn into pests in our system. But once we have let it sit for a month, we are good to go, and we can use it in our system to feed our plants.